Welcome to Bonfire Tells Stories. I'm Jack. Pull up a chair, keep the fire in your periphery, and let your nerves do the seeing. I promise to keep things simple until they aren't. Tonight's tale is about sight and how it sometimes takes you places vision shouldn't go. They called it Saint Aurelia's home for defective youth, a name that sounds like it was meant to cleanse the sins of those who built it. In truth, it was an orphanage for children the world preferred not to see. After the war, the place was shuttered. Disease, malnutrition, a fire, records never agreed. But the building remained hollow and stubborn, its windows like dead eyes that refused to blink. Years later, when the town decided to tear it down, they sent a team to catalog what could still be sold or studied. Among the forgotten toys and prayer books, one woman, a restorer named Laura Myers, found something that didn't belong to time or reason. A porcelain doll, perfectly preserved and completely eyeless. Its face was unblemished, pale as bone dust. Its dress was stitched by hand, careful work, not mass-produced. But what struck Laura most wasn't the craftsmanship. It was the deliberate emptiness where the eye should have been. Two symmetrical hollows, dark as the gaps between dreams. The inventory list labeled it Item 47B. In the margins, an older hand had written, Elena's, seize for her. Laura assumed it was nonsense, an old caretaker's superstition, the kind of line whispered by nurses who spent too many nights alone in a place like that. But she took the doll anyway, wrapping it carefully in linen and storing it with the rest of her finds. When she drove away that evening, the wind picked up behind her van, rattling through the broken windows of the orphanage like a choir that didn't know the hymn was over. Back in her studio, she placed the doll on a wooden chair to examine it later. That night, as she locked up, she noticed something odd. Her reflection in the workshop window didn't move quite when she did. Just a fraction of a second's delay. And in the reflection, behind her shoulder, the faint outline of a small, pale figure, standing very still. The next night, she'd begin to lose her sight, but she wouldn't realize it until it was too late. Laura's colleagues said she'd always had an eye for details. The irony would come later. She spent the following morning cataloging her finds. Boxes of rosaries, rusted scalpels, prayer books with pages fused by humidity, and sitting among them, the doll. The porcelain looked cleaner now, almost luminous. She told herself it was the lighting. Restoration rooms played tricks with shadows, but there was something else. She hadn't noticed the faint imprint of fingers around the doll's throat before, not painted, pressed, as if small hands had gripped it tightly while it was still warm clay. The tag attached to its wrist, the one she had written herself, was damp. The ink had bled just enough to erase the name. That night, Laura worked late. The rain outside turned steady, gentle, then violent, until the sound filled the workshop like breath. At some point, the power flickered. When it came back, the doll had shifted, no longer facing the window, but the large, antique mirror propped against the far wall. Laura froze. Her chair hadn't moved. Her desk hadn't moved. And yet, the doll was looking directly into the glass. She laughed once, too loud, and picked it up, turning it away. But when she met her own reflection, she noticed something subtle. Her face in the mirror was slightly off. Her eyes weren't aligned. One pupil seemed wider than the other, dilated like someone standing in darkness. That night, sleep came late. By the third morning, the world had begun to dull. Not blurry, just dimmer, like someone had lowered the brightness of everything. The doctor blamed a strain, suggested rest. Laura didn't argue, but she couldn't ignore the shadows that lingered when she blinked, after images of movement, always in the corners. She tried to work again, cleaning the doll's porcelain surface with a cotton swab, but as soon as she touched it, A faint sound came from somewhere near the mirror. A small, rhythmic tapping. Not wood, not glass. Something softer, like fingernails against skin. She followed the noise. The reflection was empty. Just her and the doll in the background, until a flicker of motion rippled through the silver. A face, pale and childlike, drifted into view behind her. 2 hollow sockets. No eyes. The swab fell from her hand. The mirror went still, but her reflection did not. When her assistant found her the next morning, the mirror had cracked from edge to edge, and the doll, that porcelain, perfect doll, was sitting on the chair again, facing the glass. By then, Laura had begun to understand. The doll didn't need eyes to see. It only needed someone else's. After Laura's breakdown, the investigation into her studio was meant to be procedural. A report for the insurance company. A cleanup job for the city. The kind of bureaucratic burial that makes the world feel tidy again. But nothing about what they found there was tidy. The first officer to enter said the room smelled wrong. Not rotten exactly, just off. Like old flowers trapped in glass water. The kind of smell that clings to cloth and memory. There were candles melted down to their wicks. Books of restoration techniques open and torn. And the mirror, the one that had cracked, now leaning against the far wall, its frame scorched. On the workbench sat the doll. Her dress had been changed. Someone had put her in a small hospital gown, the kind issued to children decades ago, with the initials, a CH stitched by hand. St. Aurelia's home. They found a recorder nearby. Laura's voice still lived inside it, grainy and trembling. It's not light that it sees with. It's something else. Reflection, maybe. Or memory. Every time I look, I lose a little more. The darkness isn't coming from outside, it's leaking in. Then the sound of glass breaking. Then silence. The file closed soon after. But the doll didn't vanish. A year later, it appeared again, this time at a private auction in Vienna, under a new description. Devotional artifact, mid-20th century, anonymous maker. The winning bidder was a collector named Hermann Kraus, known for acquiring religious oddities and haunted ecclesiastical relics. As one journalist put it, he placed the doll in a glass case in his study, surrounded by crucifixes and antique icons. His guests often remarked on how lifelike it seemed. Some said they could feel its gaze even though it had none. Others claimed that when the lights dimmed, the glass darkened from within, like a curtain being drawn from the other side. Kraus dismissed the rumors until he began experiencing the same symptoms Laura had described. Vision fading at the edges, like frost creeping across a window. He wrote to a friend, "At night, I see her in the glass. Not the doll, the child. Her mouth moves, but I can't hear her. I think she's praying." 2 weeks later, Kraus was found dead in his chair, facing the display case. No forced entry. No signs of struggle. His eyes were open, clouded white. The pupils burned to a pale gray. The coroner called it an advanced form of ocular necrosis, something usually seen after chemical injury. But there were no chemicals. Only the doll, sitting quietly, and a mirror across the room with a single handprint pressed against the inside of the glass. Authorities tried to store the object, but every attempt failed. Photos came out black, film fogged instantly, and even sketches seemed to distort after a few days, the paper smudging itself into oblivion. Eventually, it was sent to an archive in northern Italy, a place that specialized in objects of historical anomaly. There, behind 3 layers of reinforced glass, the doll sat once again facing a mirror. Archivists noticed a strange condensation forming between them, a film of moisture that reappeared no matter how many times it was cleaned. It wasn't water. It smelled faintly of salt and copper. No one could explain it. No one tried for long. One night, A guard making his rounds caught something unusual on the security monitor. The mirror flickered. For less than a second, the feed showed a child's reflection, head tilted, whispering something no microphone could catch. Then the screen went black. When technicians reviewed the footage the next morning, the timestamp matched the exact minute the guard collapsed, unconscious, his eyes bleeding from burst vessels. He survived, but blind. And yet, he kept repeating one thing. She was asking to be seen. The doll had traveled continents by then, crossing oceans like contagion. And wherever it went, darkness learned a new shape. The archive in northern Italy prided itself on being a resting place for things that shouldn't move. Artifacts of superstition, exorcism relics, cursed relics, all kept in climate-controlled silence. For years, the doll sat in storage, unbothered, cataloged under devotional figure, blind series, until Dr. Amelia Voss arrived. Voss was a historian who specialized in forgotten religions. Sharp mind, little patience for ghost stories. She requested access to the doll while researching the overlap between Catholic rites and pre-Christian rituals in rural Europe. When she opened the case for the first time, she laughed. No eyes, no danger, she told her assistant. But she said it too quickly. The kind of joke people make when something presses at the edge of their logic. Voss began by examining the materials. Porcelain laced with an organic compound she couldn't identify. Threads from the dress that tested positive for hemoglobin. That was curious enough. But then she found a parchment note sewn inside the lining, written in Old Italian mixed with Latin. It translated to something like, "Give her the sight of the faithful, and she will return the favor." Most historians would stop there. Amelia didn't. She compared the handwriting to records from St. Aurelia's nuns, particularly his sister Agnes, rumored to have experimented with divine mirrors. A woman who believed that sight was a sin, a temptation worse than lust. Her goal, to grant holy blindness to the innocent so they might see God without the distraction of flesh. It was Agnes who made the doll for Elena, the blind girl who prayed to see what others hid. During a storm, the nun combined two prayers, one of blessing, one of summoning. She burned incense, bone dust, and something that wasn't hers to offer. The next morning, she was gone. The doll remained, and Elena could see, but only in mirrors. Amelia's assistant began documenting the doll's reflection nightly. Every evening, the footage distorted for a few seconds. Static, flicker, distortion, and then the faint shape of a child appearing behind the glass. At first, it was dismissed as lighting errors. Then Amelia herself witnessed it. She stood before the mirror, doll on the table beside her, candlelight trembling. For nearly an hour, she stared into the void of its eyes, murmuring translations from the parchment aloud. When she blinked, she wasn't alone anymore. In the glass, another figure mirrored her every movement. The same stance, the same tilt of head, until it smiled. Amelia didn't. The air grew thick, charged, as if sound itself had mass. Then the candle went out. She didn't remember leaving the room. The next thing she knew, it was morning. Her assistant found her at her desk, eyes swollen red, pupils blown wide. She said she dreamed of a small girl whispering to her in Latin. "Now you will see." By the end of the week, Amelia's sight had deteriorated to shadows and light. She described seeing faces and reflections, mouths moving silently, and figures crawling behind the sheen of glass whenever she tried to turn away. In her final recording, she whispered, "The doll is a gate. The mirrors are its lungs. It breathes through them. Each person who looks gives it air." 2 days later, the security system caught a final image, the doll standing alone in the center of the room, facing the mirror. No humans present. And yet, a faint handprint bloomed on the inside of the glass. small, perfect, and very much alive. The archive sealed the room, but the recordings wouldn't stop. Even powered off, the monitors flickered at night, showing the same child standing closer each time. Amelia Voss vanished soon after. The doll was gone too, case shattered from the inside. The mirror? Still there, still fogged. And if you lean close enough, you can see the shape of a little girl waiting behind the silver. The doll didn't vanish for long. A month after Amelia Voss's disappearance, a shipping container was found adrift off the coast of Trieste. Inside were fragments of religious relics, blackened from fire, and one sealed wooden crate, unmarked except for a faint symbol burned into its lid, a circle bisected by a vertical line. The same mark found on the orphanage's chapel floor in the last surviving photographs of St. Aurelia's home. The crate was taken to a customs warehouse for inspection. The man assigned to open it, a worker named Marco Denny, had no patience for the supernatural. He pried the nails loose, expecting contraband or art smuggling. What he found was the doll, seated upright in a bed of ashes. He called for his supervisor, but no one answered. The air inside the warehouse seemed to thicken, humming faintly. Marco glanced toward a sheet of metal leaning nearby, a makeshift mirror. For the briefest moment, he saw movement, not his own. Something smaller, standing beside him, head tilted upward. He left that night and never came back. The next morning, security guards discovered the crate open, the doll missing, and every reflective surface, windows, chrome, even puddles on the floor, filmed over with a fine layer of soot. Weeks later, the artifact surfaced again, this time in the hands of a priest from Udine named Father Anton Bellini. He had read Voss's papers, police reports, even the orphanage archives. He believed the doll wasn't cursed, just unresolved. He intended to perform a mirror cleansing. A ritual of exorcism, sold the Vatican itself, had buried the texts. The process was simple in theory. Confront the reflection, call the spirit by name, and demand release. Bellini prepared a chapel with a single mirror and the doll placed before it. He began to write at twilight, reciting each line with steady faith. For a while, nothing happened. Then the temperature fell. The glass began to tremble, rippling like the surface of water. He heard footsteps, small ones, pacing just behind him. Bellini turned. No one. He turned back. The doll was facing him now. From the mirror, a voice so faint it could have been breath whispered. "You see me now." The priest screamed. Witnesses, a small handful of parish caretakers outside the chapel, swore they saw the mirror glow white before bursting inward, shards spraying like rain. When they entered, Father Bellini was kneeling before the altar, his head bowed. The doll sat at his feet. His eyes were gone, not removed, sealed shut, the skin smooth as porcelain. The parish buried him without ceremony. The doll was locked away in the church basement, inside a coffin meant for relics too dangerous to display. But every year, on the anniversary of that night, the mirror above the altar fogs from within. If anyone wipes the glass clean, a handprint appears, small, delicate, perfect. And in the brief moment before it fades, a child's reflection can be seen standing just behind the viewer, smiling softly. She has no eyes. I'm Jack, and this was the doll without eyes. If you ever find her, porcelain, pale, silent, don't look too long. She only needs a second to see you back. Thanks for staying by the fire. Sleep while you still can, and keep the mirrors covered.